Good evening from the NCCU TV studio. My name is Imani Johnson. I have the honor of being the reigning Miss North Carolina Central University. I also serve on the NCCU Civic Engagement Working Group. On behalf of the Civic Engagement Working Group, I am proud to be hosting this informative program regarding voting in the 2020 election. The 2020 election is very important because voters will be voting on candidates running for president, the Senate, and the local offices. The COVID-19 pandemic has complicated the process. Concerns about voting in person and the health risks that may entail have highlighted the importance of alternative ways to cast your ballot. Therefore, the Civic Engagement Working Group believes that it is important to give our students and the community good information about this election. Our guests for this discussion work for Democracy North Carolina, a renowned nonprofit organization that seeks to make our political process more transparent and accessible to everyone. We are pleased to have Tomas Lopez, Executive Director of Democracy North Carolina, and NCCU alum, Desmara Gatewood, who is a voter outreach coordinator for Democracy North Carolina. Welcome. First, Mr. Lopez, tell us why it is so important to participate in elections generally, and this upcoming election specifically, and what does Democracy North Carolina do to help the people of North Carolina participate in the political process?
Thank you for having us. I just want to also sound a note of gratitude to everyone watching right now, whether you're a part of the central community or a part of the wider community. We're glad that you're watching, and we hope that our time together will be informative. Again, my name is Tomas Lopez, and I am Executive Director of Democracy North Carolina. And when I think about reasons to take part in any election, it comes down to a thing that we say often, which is that your vote is your voice. There are so many things that taking part in elections ends up affecting. Not just the offices you hear about, like president or governor or U.S. Senate, but people who make really important decisions about what goes on in your neighborhood, what goes on at your school, or here at NCCU, how your own campus is affected. And so when we think about applying those things to 2020, what we know is that there are lots of offices that are on the ballot. And one of the things that officials will pay attention to, be paying attention to, are the ways in which people are actually coming out and voting. Because voting is basically the initial form of accountability that exists, right? If you, there's a saying we sometimes use, right? That if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And voting is a way to plant your flag to say, at some future point, look, I'm not happy about a decision that was made by my school, my governor, my senator, whatever the case may be, right? And to go to them and say, look, I voted, I will vote again, here's why my view of things matters here. So obviously there are lots of things on the ballot. People are quite familiar at this point with the things that are getting the headlines, but I'd urge people to look at the things that are local as well and why that's so important.
Ms. Gatewood, please tell us about the election calendar. What are important dates we should be aware of and why?
Thank you so much, Imani. I'm absolutely excited to be here at the illustrious North Carolina Central University. I would say that the first and most important date that you need to remember is November 3rd. November 3rd is the day of the general election. It is the last day that you can vote, and it is also the general election cycle day. Also, a date that you need to pay attention to is October 16th through the 31st. That is when early voting will begin and end. Early voting is very important because during this process, not only can you vote, but you can also register to vote. You can check to see if your registration is up to date. You can check to see if you have been purged from a voting roll, which has been an issue that we've seen in the past. So this is going to be a very important time for you to make sure that everything is up to date. Also, we want to make sure that if you are interested in doing absentee voting, you can order your ballot right now if you don't already have one. And you want to make sure that you do this so that you can complete it and that you can turn it in a timely manner. You can also use early voting polling sites to turn in your absentee ballot as well. But of course, you would also have to wait in line just because people think you can just walk right up. So some other things to know about absentee ballot. You can actually do an absentee ballot for someone else as long as they sign it. You can also do an absentee ballot for people that you are the legal guardian of. Yes, and this is also, in addition to, you can do curbside voting if you are worried about having some sort of disability. but you do not have to have a disability to do absentee voting or anything like that. Anyone who requests a ballot can actually vote by mail. And contrary to maybe some information that you may have heard, voting by mail is completely safe. And it is something that we are asking people to do if they have concerns. But of course, voting in person is an option that we are also encouraging if people do have some reservations about doing absentee voting. But November 3rd, October 15th through 31st, those are the dates that you want to pay attention to if you are planning on casting your ballot in person.
Mr. Lopez, how has the COVID pandemic complicated the election cycle?
One of the things that people should understand is that people in North Carolina and other states, they typically vote by a certain method. So in North Carolina, traditionally the most popular form of voting in the most recent election cycles has been early in-person voting, that October 15th to 31st period that Desmond just described. One of the ways that the coronavirus pandemic is affecting voting is that we're expecting, both in North Carolina and nationally, a significantly higher proportion of people to vote absentee by mail. So absentee by mail rules, just like all voting rules, vary very much from state to state. What you need to know in North Carolina is that there are a set of procedures that you have to follow, but the thing we're urging people when it comes to vote by mail, and I know we're going to talk some more about this, is basically that whatever you do, do it early. Because the COVID pandemic has created such a demand for voting by mail, we want to really encourage people that if they're sure that this is the way they want to cast the ballot, that they go ahead and do so. Don't wait until the end. Don't wait until right before election day to send in your ballot. Go ahead, if you know it's what you want to do, go ahead and do it now. Second effect that I would raise relating to the pandemic is just that we've been working hard, and so have others, to make sure that we don't have poll worker shortages in North Carolina. One of the things we saw this spring in several states were very long lines at the polls because there were cities and counties that were not able to fill all the positions that were needed to have their polling places open. We're working to prevent that, but if you're at all interested in becoming a poll worker, I urge you to visit the State Board of Elections website and go to their Democracy Heroes portal. There is a real need still. Counties are on their way to sort of having those positions filled, but we need to keep pushing, so I would encourage that as well.
For both of you, what should we know about vote by mail? Is it secure?
Desmond, do you want to take this?
Sure. Again, voting by mail is completely secure. If you are interested in voting by mail, as Tomas mentioned, you want to go ahead and make sure that you order your ballot and cast your ballot now. A lot of people don't know that actually they can mail their ballot back to the Board of Elections at this time, even though they will not begin counting them until Election Day. You need to make sure that you have everything in order just in case there is an issue. Can they be tracked? Well, you can call the North Carolina Board of Elections if you do want to know what the status is, if they've received it. Again, you can turn them in on site, but you will have to wait in line. It is, again, a completely secure way to vote, but if you do have any questions or any reservations about voting by mail, then of course voting on any day during the early voting period is a sure way to make sure that your ballot is counted and that you don't have to encounter any issues. Also, you do not need an ID to do any sort of mail-in voting. Anybody can do mail-in voting, even if you've never done it before. A couple of other things to note: just because you request a mail-in ballot now, that doesn't mean that in the future it will automatically be noted that that's what you want, so you have to do it every year, unless you do have a noted disability. You do not have to have any specific reason for requesting a mail-in ballot, but you do want to make sure that it is complete. Also, if you do request a mail-in ballot, you can still vote in person as long as you have not mailed that ballot back in. So if you change your mind and say, actually, I feel better voting in person, there is nothing wrong with still going in. But if you've already mailed your ballot back, you cannot vote twice, in essence. So those are the main things. But if you ever have any questions about the absentee process or the in-person process, you can always call 888 our vote, or you can visit dimnc.com and we can answer a lot of your questions there.
Okay, Ms. Gatewood, you already answered this question, but because this is such an important topic, I want you to please repeat this. So the question is, can the ballots be tracked?
Okay, and just to clarify, when you're asking if the ballots can be tracked, are you asking, can voters check the status of their ballots to see if they've been delivered? I just want to make sure.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah, so if you haven't gotten a returned envelope or anything, just like you would with any sort of mailing a package or a piece of mail, it's safe to assume that it has been delivered. However, if you do have concerns about that, you can always call the State Board of Elections just to confirm and make sure that it has been safely delivered and that they have received it.
Again, for both of you, what should voters know about voting during the early voting period?
I'm happy to speak to this. One of the important things to understand about early voting and why we really encourage it is because early voting allows for what we call same-day registration, which means if you're not registered to vote, or if you recently moved, or there's some kind of issue with your voter registration, you can go to any early voting site in your county. And actually, if you are a resident of Durham or a student at Central, that is counting Central is where you live, that includes the Turner Law Building here on the Central campus. During that October 15th through 31st period, and go and fix your registration or register for the first time and vote in one stop. That is the really critical thing to understand. You know, there are options Monday through Friday, there are weekend options. Now they vary from county to county what that looks like. But again, early voting is really great because it offers you both the flexibility of the timing and also the flexibility to address any issues with your registration that may come up once you're there to cast your ballot.
I did want to note an extra thing, thank you, Tomas, about the tracking the ballot, because this is rewinding back a little bit, but that is actually a very creative way to make sure that your ballot has been delivered. So if you actually mail it from the post office, they can give you a receipt that literally gives you a tracking number where you can see where it is, when it has been delivered, and at which stage it is. They actually will give you a receipt, and if you give them your email address, they can email you a tracking link. And this is with any package, but I do think it's very smart to do that with the absentee voting process as well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gatewood, for that information. What should voters know about voting on Election Day?
The big thing to know about voting on Election Day is that it is traditionally the most popular day to vote. Polls open early, close late. It's a big window. You have to go to a specific location on Election Day. So it is not like the early voting period where you can go to any location in your county. You have a designated polling place for Election Day. You can look up what your designated polling place is by visiting the State Board of Elections website, ncsbe.gov. There will also be a link to there at our voter information portal at ncuvoter.org. You're also not able on Election Day to register to vote for the first time or fix problems with your registration at the polling site. That's why we urge early voting. But Election Day remains very popular. Just got to make sure the things that are distinct between that and early voting.
I would also note if voters are encountering problems, they can again call that number 888 our vote. We will have poll monitors that will be stationed at various precincts and locations that are going to be working to make sure that there's not any voter intimidation, that people aren't breaking any of the rules and trying to turn people around, because historically people of color and people in different communities have been given misinformation or turned around or tried to be discouraged from voting. So we will have poll monitors on site to make sure that people can vote safely and use the process that is constitutional and legal.
Thank you, Ms. Gatewood. I would like to stay with what you just said because I know a lot of our students have had the problem where they've been asked to share an ID. So if our students do encounter that this election cycle, what can they do? I know you mentioned a phone number, or is there a website as well that we could use?
I think the key thing that people should know is when it comes to the ID question specifically, right, is that North Carolina law does not require currently for people to show photo identification when they go to the polls. You may have heard about photo ID requirement. That is blocked by the courts. That is not in effect. You don't need it for a mail ballot. You don't need it for an in-person ballot. Now, there are a few cases where you may need to show proof of address, something with your name and address. That would be, for instance, if you're registering to vote for the first time at an early voting site, or if when you registered to vote before going to vote, you didn't provide certain information, that information with your voter registration. But as a general rule, people should not be having those issues. And one of the reasons we do urge that phone number, 888-R-VOTE, is because we want to be able to respond quickly. So we've got lots of information on our website. You visit ncvoter.org. You can learn about the rules, the procedures, all that stuff. But if you are actually in a situation where you've gone to the polls and for some reason they're not letting you vote, call that number, 888-R-VOTE. People will be ready to assist you.
Okay, thank you. We would like to thank Mr. Thomas Lopez and Ms. Desmira Gatewood for all of your help in getting our students and the community involved and knowledgeable about everything that is happening for the 2020 election. We'd also like to thank the NCCU TV studio, our civic engagement working group here on the campus of North Carolina Central University. We hope you all will continue to stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, wait 6 feet apart. We hope to see you during early voting before Election Day. So please make sure you get out and vote. Thank you all for watching.